All right. Now, I'm in sort of a quandary here because I have a long commentary about characterization of all of the players that have been out in the storm. And it relates to a problem in spiritual living, but I don't know how to work it into the running commentary. So I don't know how it's going to work at all. I'll fit it in somewhere, but it's not going to be tonight. In fact, when we get to the end, after the running commentary, reading the play, it might take 2 talks to get through because I got such a lot of things that I want to talk about. All right, let's read Act 3, Scene 5.
Page
83.
Yeah, let's see. 83. I'll start it off and pass it to Jerry. I will have my revenge ere I depart his house.
Oh, my lord, I may be censor that nature thus gives way to loyalty, something fears me to think of.
I now perceive it was not altogether your brother's evil disposition made him seek his death, but a provoking merit set awork by a reprovable badness in himself.
How malicious is my fortune that I must repent to be just. This is the letter which he spoke of, which approves him an intelligent party to the advantages of France. Oh heavens, that his treason were not, or what I, the detective.
Go with me to the Duchess.
If the matter of this paper be certain, you have mighty business in hand.
True or false, it hath laid the Earl of Gloucester. Seek out where thy father is, that he may be ready for apprehension.
If I find him comforting the king, it will stop his suspicion more fully. I will persevere in my course of loyalty, though the conflict be sore between that and my blood.
I will lay trust upon thee, and thou shalt find a dearer father in thy love.
Well, in the Old Testament, the sin against the Holy Ghost, while the unforgivable sin was sexual abuse. Self-conscious sexual abuse out of harmony with the cosmos for reasons other than procreation. First, it was an abuse by pleasure-seeking, and then it was used magically. In the New Testament, the sin against the Holy Ghost is mentioned several times in Matthew's Gospel alone as lying. So in both cases, it has to do with organs of expression at both ends of the spine. Sin has followed the path of the creative force from the sacrum and the genitals up the spine to the brain and the larynx. Sin has correspondingly evolved from sexual pleasure activity to intellectual creative activity. It started as personal disobedience. It has become now a spiritual abuse, an intentional act against the truth. If a person lies, they're intentionally going against the truth. Both kinds of sin are complicitous. When we sinned sexually, we did it with someone. And when we lie with and to someone. We do lie to ourselves, but when we do so, it's as though our self was another. We say, I don't know if you've ever caught yourself lying to yourself, it's definitely a division in the internal consciousness. we look at the very early speeches in this scene between Edmund and Cornwall, in the lines between line 2 all the way up to line 15, it is atrocious as what they're doing. What they're doing is they're trying to say such positive things, but what they're really doing is lying about what they're doing and their basic motivations. How much better it would be and how much more therapeutic if they were direct and gave the unvarnished truth and didn't have to lie to themselves and to the world and each other about what they were doing. All right, there's not much else that's of much interest to us, so let's go into read scene 5, and I think we're up to Eric.
Here is better than the open air. Take it thankfully. I will piece out the comfort with what addition I can. I will not be long from you.
All the power of his wits have given way to his impatience. The gods reward your kindness.
Frateretto calls me and tells me Nero is an angler in the lake of darkness. Pray, innocent, and beware the foul fiend.
Prithee, Nuncle, tell me whether a madman be a gentleman or a yeoman.
A king. A king.
No, he is a yeoman that has a gentleman to his son. But he's a mad yeoman that sees his son, a gentleman for him.
To have 1,000 with red burning spits come hissing upon him.
The whole fiend bites my back.
He's mad that trusts in the tameness of a wolf. A horse's hell, a boy's love, or a whore's oath.
It shall be done. I will arraign them straight. Come, sit thou here, most learned justice. Thou, sapient sir, sit here. Now, you she-foxes.
Look where he stands and glares. Once thou eyes at trial, madam? Come where the born, Bessie to me.
Her boat hath a leak, and she must not speak. Why she dares not come over to thee.
The foul fiend haunts poor Tom as a voice of a nightingale. Papa Dance cries in Tom's belly for 2 white herring. Croak not, black angel, I have no food for thee.
How do you, sir? Stand you not so amazed? Will you lie down and rest on the cushions?
I'll see their trial first. Bring in their evidence. Thou robbed man of justice, take thy place. I robbed man of justice, take thy place. And thou his yoke fellow, equity, bench by his side. You are other commission. Sit you two.
Let us deal justly. Sleepest or awakest, thou jolly shepherd? Thy sheep be in the corn, and for one blast of thy minikin mouth, thy sheep shall take no harm. Her the cat is great.
Arraign her first, it's gone. I here take my oath before this honorable assembly. She kicked the poor king, her father.
Come hither, mistress. Is your name Goneril?
Cannot deny it.
Cry you mercy. I look to you for a joint stool.
Here's another, whose forth looks proclaim what store her heart is made on. Stop her there. Arms, sword, fire, corruption in the place, false justicer. Why hast thou let her escape?
Bless thou 5 wits.
Oh, pity. Sir, where is the patience now that you so oft have boasted to retain?
My tears begin to take his part so much that they mar my contemplating.
The little dogs and all, Tray, Blanche, and Sweetheart, see they bark at me.
Tom will throw his head at them. Avant you curs, be thy mouth or black or white. Tooth that poison that bite, mastiff, greyhound, mongrel grim, hound or spaniel branch or limb, or bobtailed tyke or D. Cease. Come march to wakes and fairs and market towns. Poor town, thy horn is dry.
Then let them anatomize Regan. See what breeds about her heart. Is there any cause in nature that make these hard hearts? You, sir, I entertain for one of my 100. Only I do not like the fashion of your garments. You will say they are Persian, but let them be changed.
Now, my good lord, lie here and rest a while.
Make no noise. Make no noise. Draw the curtains. So. We'll go to supper in the morning.
I go to bed at noon.
Come hither, friends. Where is the king, my master?
Here, sir, but trouble him not. His wits are gone.
Good friends, I prithee take him in thy arms. I have o'erheard a plot of death upon him. There is a litter ready, lay him in, and drive toward Dover, friend, where thou shalt meet both welcome and protection. Take up thy master if thou shouldst daily half an hour, his life with thine and all that offered to defend him. Stand in assured loss. Take up, and follow me, that will to some provision give thee quick conduct.
Oppressed nature sleeps. This restmate might yet have blamed thy broken sinews, which, if convenience will not allow, stand in hard cure. Come help to bear thy master. Thou must not stay behind.
Come away.
When we are better see bearing our woes, we scarcely think our miseries our foes. Who alone suffers most of the mind, leaving free things and happy shows behind. But then the mind doth overskip, when grief hath mates and bearing fellowship. How light and portable my pain seems now, when that which makes me bend makes the king bow. He chided as I fathered Tom away, mark the high noises thyself bewray, with false opinion whose wrong thoughts defile thee in thy just reproof, and repeals and reconciles thee. What will hap more tonight, save scape the king lurk. Right on Edgar. Edgar probably is a pretty good disguise artist. In fact, he's good enough to apparently fool his father. He doesn't recognize him. He and his father have been together on the scene twice now, and the father hasn't recognized him. But let's for a second try to compare him to Hamlet, who also feigns madness. He does so very masterfully. Hamlet says he's going to act strange and to feign madness, and when he does so, we are never sure whether he is mad or not. Even he doesn't seem to know. But Edgar, even though he is a very good disguise artist, I do not think that he is a good feigner of magic, of madness. He does speak in terms of lyrics from songs, which is one way that the more unconscious part of our being does speak to us. We talked about that last time. But that seemed to be one of Shakespeare's way of teasing or taunting the audience more than anything else. In this scene, he's naming demons straight from the book of devils. That's just not convincing. It doesn't happen that way. It isn't that neat and tidy that somebody who's being pestered by demons knows each and every one of their names and they happen to fit with the book of devils of the day. When there is insanity, it's much more spontaneous than that, and it's much more personal. And it's extremely hard to predict, mostly because the sufferer can't distinguish his or her state so readily. At the onset, and until it is very advanced, it's extremely subtle. A phrase that is not coherent slips out here and there, and then very gradually there is a slight metamorphosis of tone and so forth. So in this regard, Hamlet's rendition of Feigning Madness is much, much more convincing. We have to keep this in mind because this play was written later than Hamlet. So Shakespeare, we know, is capable of that. And there may be a reason for this. I haven't really delved in to see it. There's one peculiar thing about it, and that it is sufficient to fool the people here, people who are with him. That's because most people really never have observed insanity. And anything that seems incongruous to them, they're afraid of. And so they really don't know. And they're pretty easily fooled. Now, Lear's case, much, much more difficult. We have not yet determined whether his madness is true to reality or whether it is theatrical madness for the purposes of the playwright. This play was written about 5 years after Hamlet, so we know again that Shakespeare is very capable of producing or knowing about insanity. One thing that argues in favor of this being a genuine state of psychological trouble is that there is an evolution and a metamorphosis of the condition. Moreover, this evolution or metamorphosis is very logical or very psychological. I'd like to look into that a little bit. From the viewpoint of mysticism, insanity occurs when there is an irreparable breach in the vehicles of consciousness between the spirit and the external material world through the external personality. There are a lot of strains that can take place that produce unusual character, but if someone is insane, there is a breach. And that is a very, very serious condition. Even though there can be stress and strain, and that can produce longer or shorter periods of exotic psychological behavior, they are not really severe. However, when a breach occurs, it usually isn't a sudden thing. It's not like taking and breaking a stick over your knee. The constitution that we have inwardly, our inner vehicles of consciousness, our mind, our desire bodies, our vital bodies, have a very long evolution behind them. And they're built by not only the God within, but all the gods that are hierarchies. And they do a pretty masterful job. So most people are pretty resilient. And it takes a lot to produce a complete break in the line of consciousness. Usually, there's a long, hard struggle, and we try very hard to keep things together. It's as if the spirit knows that its vehicles its duty to do things in the world are a serious matter. And in that regard, as far as trying to stay clear and awake in consciousness and keep it together, we are all very conscientious at heart. That we've talked about so far, very briefly, is the mechanical side of the problem. We've not been very thorough about it. We'll mention a little bit more here and there. But it would take us too long to go into a detailed thing. I plan to do it someday in a astrology course on Freud and Jung, to go into all of the different psychological states that are really severe from a spiritual point of view, but right now isn't the time. When there is this long, hard struggle that sometimes results in insanity, the subject is usually unaware of the mechanical side. Very few people have studied the mysteries the way we have studied the mysteries, and they don't know that their inner constitution is made up of inner vehicles. And even the people who do know this information are not always self-consciously adept of the fact that they're functioning, adept at knowing that they're functioning in these vehicles. A lot of people can't tell when they're thinking or when they're emoting. And it takes really sometimes quite strong instances before a person can really tell what's going on. People who are so ignorant of their inner constitution, who haven't taken the time to get to know themselves and to understand what works in them, are very few. So most people do not know how they function in word light. They've never watched it, and they don't know their limits. Most people, when they're going through a process like this, whether it's regular life or a long, devolving psychological condition, are more aware of the other side, not the mechanics, but the story side. People are aware of the story, of the history of events in their lives. You go to some place like Mendota and look at the patients there, they've all got a story to tell. And they look back over it again and again. And special attention is paid to the things that are unpleasant or the things that are unacceptable. Events that are a threat to the ego nature of the individual. Even in the story side, most are not conscious of what is going on. Very few are really aware that they are living out one, or more likely, a number of divine stories, myths, or something like that. The whole of creation is a divine drama. It is composed of stories. This is why in all religions people hold the scriptures and the stories so sacred. And they take them as literal, because in their story character, they are the truth. So as these stories, which form the divine dream, are externalized and realized through materialization, and the materialization takes place in the unknown, which is matter, it becomes not a story, it becomes history. And the history finalizes things, factual things. When we realize the consequences of things that have been finalized, that becomes soul material. And when that is absorbed and taken into the spirit, it becomes the power of the spirit to do things. Soul power. In insanity or in deep psychological problems, they usually don't occur. They're not the result of one single event. One has to have lived an unbalanced life, or a life that's weak in follow-through for a very long time. Often several lives before it gets to be a critical state. There usually is something like a culminating event, but it's much more like the straw that broke the camel's back than it is the case of like breaking a stick over your knee. It's something that it builds up and up and up, and you stress yourself until finally there is something that goes wrong. In the long term or in the short term, when the spirit is immersed in matter, its true spiritual awareness is dim. Most of us are not aware of ourselves as spiritual beings. It's difficult for us then to look at the spiritual dream. Some of the things that we confront in the process are unpleasant and repulsive. When we're living out the dream, our life goes on, and part of the story, at least in the materialization, is difficult. Or even the materialization, the material world itself, is very hard. It's impossibly hard in some cases. The fact that we are divided and we speak with two voices rather than speaking with one voice very much aggravates things, so that our energies are split. When carrying through on life is difficult enough on its own. When both of the self and ego work together as a team, or when the personal ego is tamed, or in some way subservient to the spirit, then one can accomplish things. One can carry through no matter what the conditions are. That doesn't happen. So usually there's no follow-through, and there's no competition, no completion, I should say, or closure. And we get to feel as if we can't carry something out, and we get weakened. When the personal ego has usurped the rulership of our conscious activities, and it persists in doing its own selfish things, then the spirit is deprived of soul material. When the personal ego isn't sacrificing and facing things and digesting things, there's nothing to feed the divine part. So the spirit doesn't grow, and it doesn't evolve, and it doesn't unfold, and it doesn't awaken. And it doesn't develop a stronger will to be and to live and manifest the creative dream. When that's happening with the lower nature, or the personal ego seems to be waxing in strength. But it's a kind of strength that is brittle. We've all seen those egoists that cry like little babies when they're truly challenged. Now, over the long run, if something like this persists for a long time, The spirit cannot persist, and it cannot participate, and it withdraws. The withdrawal is usually slow, but it can be abrupt. If there's a breach in the chain of the vehicles of consciousness, it usually occurs at the weakest point, where there is the greatest stress. And that weakest point is usually determined by imbalance. We often say that people who are psychologically troubled are unbalanced. If an individual stresses emotion and desire, as one example, to the detriment of thought, the break will occur between the mind and the desire body. The spirit will be forced to withdraw with the mind. And what it leaves behind, what it can't get through, is a desire body that doesn't have any controls on it. And that is somebody that rages in all kinds of desires. The break can occur in other places. If the etheric consciousness is not well developed or well heated, the break can occur between the desire body and the etheric body. In which case, what is left behind is a vegetable, something with a mineral form and an etheric body. The spirit and the higher vehicles has withdrawn. Now, for a few moments, let's look at Lear. The story for Lear is probably something like the story of a king in a fairy tale. He's divinely suited and appointed to his position. In his pride and in his pomp, probably feels he's done a good job. This is very subjective. And having done a good job, he feels he's ready for a well-earned and well-deserved retirement. He no doubt sees himself, as we often do, as benign and extremely generous and beneficent. He's dividing all of his wealth and all of his power among his progeny. His favorite daughter refuses to play into this need for pomposity, and she won't perjure herself, or she will not fall for the sham of making big proclamations of love or anything like that. In modern language, we would say of Cordelia that she refuses to be codependent. She isn't going to play into that bullshit game. This is his first unexpected resistance. It's probably unexpected because he hasn't looked beyond his own self-importance. The self-importance of a king whose every command is expected to be honored. He spoiled himself. He gets his way all the time. And he has that weak and brittle ego nature. Rather than ask why things didn't work out as he planned, and to try to understand the way things are with his most beloved daughter, he acts preemptively and he projects the problem onto Cordelia and takes the stance, I'll show her, and he gives her a portion to the other kids. Then he has two progressively more difficult confrontations with Goneril and Regan. He continues to want to have things his way or withdraw. And he withdraws and loses everything, or at least loses everything externally. But even though he's lost everything, as far as we've seen him, he doesn't accept his own part in the matter. He sees only Goneril and Regan. In fact, we saw 2 scenes ago when we looked at that, he was obsessive. He couldn't get, at least 5 times in a short scene, he couldn't get out of his mind the ingratitude of them. They are ungrateful and they're malicious, but he can't do anything about that. Most of the time, in most of our problems, we can't do anything about the other people outside of us. He, like us, needs to work on himself. He obsesses and obsesses, making it a situation that it is impossible to do anything about. He can't go forward. He can't meet the challenge of life because he has made, he's like walking into a wall where there's no door. He's obsessed in saying the problem is his daughters rather than himself, and he can't go forward because he's trying to walk through the wall where there's no door. So that becomes an impassable barrier for him. So in this regard, it's pretty psychologically accurate. Shakespeare, as so many times, as we've seen before, proves to be psychologically correct. What happens is he goes into a rage, even raging at the storm, which he welcomes because it distracts his attention. What we call insanity, whether it is or not, is often called madness. The condition is associated with anger because that anger is so often apparent. The misconception is that the anger is the cause of the problem. The stuff of the anger is the psychic energy that would normally facilitate all psychic activity, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. So when it's displaced, and he can't carry out the intent that he wants, and he believes himself only an impossible intent, that displaced energy just breaks him loose inside of him with anger and wrath and rage, and he seems really bad about everything. So in this sense, it is very much like going into a stone wall. Gathering up the energy and going again and again and again. By the time we get to this scene, his condition has progressed. And this progression is also psychological. We find here Lear conducting a mock trial of his 2 ungrateful daughters. The psychological energy that was first used to go forward in life and then was withdrawn and displaced into anger has now been withdrawn even further. It's been turned inward more. Now, if this is done in a temporary way and in a therapeutic way, it can be a very positive thing. However, if we turn our energy inwardly and it becomes a habitual stance toward life, if we don't go out to meet life, then the creative imagination becomes incapacitated. And it can't accomplish anything through the imagination, which is a great tool for channeling the psychic energy. And what happens is, when the withdrawal is long and sustained and there is no intent of carrying things out anymore, it becomes idle, weakening fantasy. In fact, the fantasy even builds up conditions that are so difficult that there are phobias about actually going forward again or actually going outward again. It makes it almost impossible even if one wanted to. Now, therapeutically, the psychic energy can be used in fantasy and imagination in what is called psychodrama. In psychodrama, one relives the events of one's life's history. However, one does not go over the same old stuff again and again and again. The characters are changed when there's a psychodrama. You may play your own adversary, and you get to see it from another point of view. And you get to see, when you have many points of view, you can see why your way of approaching life has been unsuccessful. If it is truly therapeutic, and one can see things clearly from enough points of view, one can find a positive way to view the situation. In which case, it's something like a playwright making scenario for things to be worked out. One can find a way to go forward and progress. And that's a very healthy thing. The principle of therapeutic object lessons is exactly what happens to people who have been deprived of evolutionary conditions or evolutionary experiences. For example, if one has been deprived of their experiences in a past life because their body was burned and they couldn't gain everything from the purgatorial process and they couldn't assimilate it back into the spirit, in the next life they die as a child. And as a child, they're taken right into first heaven, and then they're given object lessons. They're put, if there's something going on, like a fierce fight or something like that, the child is taken and put into the aura of the people who are fighting. And then it is extracted, and then it is put into the aura of where something like a symphony is being played. And when one can see how the consequences of different types of behavior, they get in effect by these object lessons that are programmed and planned for them by the people helping in second heaven, it is a really valuable thing for them. It's like playing catch-up. There's an impersonal objectivity in this method. And this is what Hamlet meant when he wanted to have the play within the play to see whether the king could see himself. The technique is not only used in psychodrama, it has a much bigger use. It's used in cosmic drama. And in cosmic drama, one acts out of myth, or one acts out of spiritual scripture, and it helps one to see oneself in a bigger frame of consciousness. In this way, it has been used successfully by Freemasonry. All of the initiations of the Eleusinian mysteries, where a person raised one's consciousness by experiencing, living out a higher kind of consciousness, saying, make believe, maybe I can do this. it has been very successful. Unfortunately, Lear is not using it therapeutically. He's using it to condemn his daughters. And he's still not facing his own responsibility. There has been a metamorphosis and a progression of his condition. It is more in the direction of a tailspin than in something that he's going to be able to pull himself out of. It is a self-succoring or a self-serving fantasy, and it's nothing more. He wants to really down them, and he wants to be judge and jury in the whole business. So he no longer rages so much. In this scene, he's hardly raged at all. Instead, he's put the energy, the psychic energy, into fantasy, and unfortunately, he hasn't done it in such a way that he can do himself much good. Again, in the whole process, it's interesting to watch the actions of the fool, because the fool, throughout the scene, as in the earlier scene, the fool plays the part of the counterbalance and tries to be from without what he needs to find inside of himself. Unfortunately, he has a very hard road to hoe. All right, let's read the last scene of the act. Who's up? You are.
Go speedily to my lord, your husband. Show him this letter. The army of France has landed. Seek out the traitor Gloucester.
Hang him instantly.
Knock out his eyes.
Leave him to my displeasure. Edmund, keep you our sister company. The revenges we are bound to take upon your traitor's father are not fit for your beholding. Advise the Duke where you are going, to a most festinate preparation. We are bound to the like. Our post shall be swift and intelligent betwixt us. Farewell, dear sister, farewell. My lord of Gloucester? How now, where's the king?
My lord of Gloucester hath conveyed him hence. Some 5 or 36 of his knights, hot questress after him, met him at the gate, and with some other of the lord's dependents are gone with him toward Dover, where they boast to have well-armed friends.
Get horses for your mistress.
Farewell, sweet lord and sister.
Go seek the traitor Gloucester, pinion him like a thief, bring him before us. Though well we may not pass upon his life without the form of justice, yet our power shall do of courtesy to our wrath, which men may blame but not control. Who's there? The traitor?
Ingrateful fox 'tis he.
Bind fast his corky arms.
What means your graces? Good, my friends, consider, you are my guests. Do me no foul play, friends.
By him, I say.
Hard, O filthy traitor.
Unmerciful lady as you are, I am none.
To this chair bind him. Villain thou shalt find.
By the kind gods, 'tis most ignobly done to pluck me by the beard.
So white and such a traitor?
Naughty lady, these hairs which thou hast thus ravished from my chin will quicken and accuse thee. I am your host. With robber's hands, my hospitable favors. You should not ruffle thus. What will you do?
Come, sir, what letters had you late from France?
Be simple answered, for we know the truth.
And what confederacy have you with the traitors, laid-footed in the kingdom?
To whose hands have you sent the lunatic king? Speak.
I have a letter guessingly set down, which came from one that's of neutral heart, and not from one who hath opposed.
Honey.
And false.
No, that's not it.
Yes, line 51.
Thank you. Where hast thou sent the king?
To Dover.
Wherefore to Dover? Wast thou not charged at peril?
Wherefore to Dover? Let him answer that.
I am tied to the stake, and I must stand the course.
Wherefore to Dover?
Because I would not see thy cruel nails pluck out his poor old eyes, nor thy fierce sister in his anointed flesh rash boorish fangs. The sea with such a storm as his bare head in hell-black night endured would have buoyed up and quenched the stellar fires. Yet, poor old heart, he hopped the heavens to rain. If wolves had at thy gate howled that darn time, thou shouldst have said, Good porter, turn the key. All cruels else subscribe, but I shall see the winged vengeance overtake such children.
Thou shalt see it never. Fellows, hold the chair. Upon these eyes of thine I set my foot.
He that will think to live till he be old, give me some help, O cruel, O you gods.
One side will mock another, the other too.
If you see vengeance,
Hold your hand, my lord. I have served you ever since I was a child, but better service have I never done you than now to bid you hold.
Oh, now, you dog.
If you did wear a beard upon your chin, I'd shake it on this quarrel. What do you mean?
My villain.
Nay, then come on and take the chance of anger.
Give me thy sword. A peasant stand up thus?
I am slain, my lord. You have one eye left to see some mischief on him. Oh,
Lest it see more, prevent it. Out, vile jelly, where is thy luster now?
All dark and comfortless. Where is my son Edmund? Edmund enkindled all the sparks of nature to quit this horrid act.
O treacherous villain, thou callest on him that hates thee. It was he that made the overture of thy treasons to us, who is too good to pity thee.
all my follies, then Edgar was abused. King gods, forgive me that, and prosper him.
Go, thrust him out at gates, and let him smell his way to Dover. How's my lord? How look you?
I have received a hurt. Follow me, lady. Turn out that eyeless villain. Throw this slave upon the dunghill. Regan, I'd lead apace. Untimely comes this hurt. Give me your arm.
I'll never care what wickedness I do, if this man come to good.
She lived long, and in the end meet the old course of death. Women will all turn monsters.
Let's follow the old earl and get the bedlam to lead him where he would. His roguish madness allows itself to anything.
Go thou, I'll fetch some flax and whites of eggs to apply to his bleeding face. Now heaven help him.
Well, from here on in, I have very hard time making decent notes. We've come across a very large and difficult subject. That is the place of violence in art. It's way too big for tonight, and it would probably be way too big for this entire series of talks without skewing it away from the original intent. So let's try to look at it in a very limited, dangerously brief and fast way. And let's limit it by trying to get to an answer of one question. Why would Shakespeare include a scene wherein someone plucks out the eyes of a man and stomps on them when that man is his host? That's pretty heavy and pretty violent drama. The whole business of violence is not new. city of Athens, they passed a law at one time about how many monsters you could have on stage, limiting them. It was because a playwright, who I believe was Aeschylus, and I believe that the play was one out of the Orestia trilogy, had so many Erinyes on stage that, and the crowd took it so seriously that they panicked and there was a stampede and people were injured. I don't know if anybody was harmed or not. Orestes had these Erinyes, which were guilt embodiments created by his own thoughts and desires after he killed his mother. And he killed his mother in order to avenge his father, who had been killed by his mother. And it's his duty to avenge his father, at least in that custom, but it brought upon him all of these guilt embodiments. Question is not dated either. It's not so old that it's passé. I think the statistics are that if a child watches just several hours of television per night or per week, by the time that child has reached majority, it will have seen thousands of violent deaths. So it's a thing that is relevant, which is the only reason I took it on, even though it's way over my head. In Judeo-Christian mythical history, the sin of violence is the second sin. The first sin was the sin of Adam, and it was the abuse of the creative energy for selfish purposes. Adam and Eve acted on their selfishness, and it became sin. The sin of violence, of homicide, was the sin of their son Cain. It's a sin of repulsion. It is when we try to get rid of something that we don't want by asserting ourselves rather than asserting ourselves selfishly for what we do want. So there's a difference between the first and second sins. Perhaps violence isn't the matter at all, because you don't have to watch popular channels to see violence. You go to the Nature Channel, you'll see all kinds of violent deaths. But yet when a lion kills a gazelle or something like that, it's not objectionable. When you see that kind of death, it doesn't appeal to, or it doesn't excite your baser nature, and it certainly doesn't drive one to want to go out and do violence, unless one is too much of a hunter. I don't want to take any cheap shots. I couldn't pass that one up. Perhaps it isn't even a matter of the degree or the amount of violence. I doubt whether anyone has ever seen this play and left it and went home to pluck out somebody's eyes and stomp on them. So the degree of violence is not so much either. But still we ask, why is it being done? Because it certainly is repulsive. When an animal kills, it doesn't do so as to satisfy any kind of twisted pleasure, or it doesn't do it out of some kind of selfishness. When an animal kills, it's either in self-defense, or when it has attacked for food. In either case, it's a matter of necessity, clean necessity, for which there is no other option. And in either case, it is not a self-conscious act. Pretty terrible when we self-consciously feel we have to get rid of somebody. In the milieu of gangsters, murder is sometimes also seen as necessary. But that's because the world is so perverted and is dark and is covered by many layers of sin, so that one can't see clearly. So necessity doesn't seem to be a sufficient criterion for judging the place of violence in art, though it may be a contributory factor. Plucking out eyeballs isn't necessary for the play, or at least so it seems that. I don't know, I don't think you could call it adventitious violence either, though. The amount of violence doesn't appear to be a sufficient criterion either. Because if we think about it, in the last act of Hamlet, everybody of importance dies, and we don't consider it excessive or misguiding or anything like that. As far as I can tell, it's all a matter of intent. The reason for many violent films or TV shows, the reason why they're repulsive is intent. The intent is not necessarily to demonstrate something about human nature or morality or immorality. Even when the good guy kills the bad guy, or the so-called good guy kills the so-called bad guy. Producers may protest and say that just isn't the case, but they are trying to show something about human nature, but it really isn't. The intent of popular mass media, as far as I can see, is entertainment. There is a necessity, but the necessity is staying on the air. But even that isn't really simple. If we ask people who watch such shows whether they like seeing people getting killed, most of them say no. Yet they tune in every week and they hunch for the good guy, even when sometimes people will cheer or feel satisfaction when the bad guy gets it. The nature and intent of desire is to excite us into action. That's why we have a desire body. It is to excite the vital and physical vehicles into action. Unfortunately, our desire bodies don't serve the spirit, and they have a life of their own. When we have dull personal lives, and the hugeness of the world makes us feel inadequate, we feel we need excitement. We need that to know that we're alive. And we find excitement entertaining. And we've been flattered so much and made to feel so important, we feel that we have the right to be entertained. Most folks can't awaken and sustain desire on their own, so they need entertainment to do it. I'm guilty of that. I need entertainment from time to time. Excitement and entertainment are valid purposes for art. However, to only appeal to the baser emotions is not a valid purpose. It's true that a lot of people can only experience cheap thrills, but that's no reason to leave them there and to exploit their inadequacies. It is the duty, it sounds old-fashioned, it sounds like moral preaching, but I believe it's the duty of artists who have creative capacity to intend to truly edify and to improve audiences, even if it's only by incremental amounts, infinitesimally incremental. That would matter in there somewhere. When the good guy kills the bad guy, it's not a moral triumph. It's a defeat. The good guy had to resort to violence. It's a failure. It is vengeance that we indulge in. And we indulge in it under the cloak of self-righteousness. Self-righteousness put in the hands of the so-called good guy. Even though we may not be moved by similar actions or urged to lives of sin, the repeated experience and re-experience of these desires serves to strengthen them in us. The more we experience a desire, the more we are going to experience it. We're not going to sin ourselves out. We're just going to make it all the more likely. Moreover, even though it's only a play, a movie, or a TV show, repeated re-experience without real consequences and moral growth desensitizes us. Desensitizes us to such a point that we think violence is all right. A few minutes ago, we mentioned psychodrama for healing and mystery dramas for edification. There is a general psycho-artistic theory about this property of drama. That is, that the actors and the audience are healed by living through performances, even if those performances have to do with negative things. Where you say, I always wanted to choke that person, or something like that. That principle, or that idea, appears to be true. It's worked for me. Often, actors are changed by acting some roles. But it seems to happen more often in short-term roles, more like operas, rather than something that runs for hundreds of performances. People in the audience do work out some of their problems through the players in the drama. And they do it because they can step outside of themselves and see themselves objectively. They can also experience something and see it through their feelings so that they can come to a logical or a psychological conclusion without having to go through the full living of it. When that is done, it is usually one occasion or a few occasions, and not again and again and again with numbing regularity. It's much much different than watching a weekly series where it happens every week. In such cases, the artist and the producer intend for an atmosphere to have that very end. Shakespeare is not merely entertaining, even though he realizes he has to do some of that. It doesn't have to be about kings and queens, though it usually is, to make it of greater importance and to add to the gravity and dignity of the play. When it is done, one always senses more of something more than the mere action. One's mind and one's feelings are exercised in all sorts of ways. If you go to something like a Shakespeare play, you find yourself alive inwardly. And it's more than just elation and desire, excitement. In such a setting, one thinks about this and thinks about that and wants to change their life. And as part of reality, violence may be necessary. And it may in such a case be perfectly fine. Now that we have one little idea about violence in art, we can try to answer why Shakespeare would include a scene with such extreme violence in it. Within the context of this idea, the answer is the same as it is with a rabbit and a wolf. Necessity. Lear is on the verge of going mad from the experience of ingratitude. As we've seen, he probably has his own deficiency with regard to gratitude, which caused him to exercise shallow judgment in the first place. That's a whole other issue. Nonetheless, we might write off his grief and rage and say it's all just him. We might just say, well, it's just his foolishness. He's just a silly, shallow old man, and he didn't learn anything. We have to have evidence of how serious this is. So we realize that King Lear is not just talking through his hat. Even as it is, there's some tendency to do that. We tend to discount King Lear pretty easily. However, when we have a shocking demonstration of how callous and how heartless ingratitude and spoilage can be, then we have to take things more seriously. We're not dealing with Sunday schoolers here. We're dealing with people who are tough cases. We can see the extremity of the baseness, which extends to all of humanity and not just Reagan and her husband. The play contains sufficient loftiness to allow such a statement. There are a number of very good individuals in this play who are making huge self-sacrifices. We have Kent and Edgar and the Fool who are making huge sacrifices. And Gloucester, out of the goodness of his heart, has been brought to make a huge sacrifice. In Rome, Cornelius Tacitus wrote that his histories were for the purpose of exposing and showing very clearly the heinous deeds of people for what they were, while at the same time allowing the good deeds of great men to shine out like stars. And something like that, such a contrast, a dark night with very bright stars, appears to be Shakespeare's intent in this play, and that includes this scene. So to some extent, the revulsive violence that we see is artistically justifiable. And that's it for tonight. Didn't have time to do more.
So if you say pluck out the eyes first and then stomp on them?
Yeah.
No fun in that.
They use grapes in this.
Stomp on the eyes first when the person is in excruciating pain, then pluck them out. That serves the Shakespeare's got it wrong.
You're on tape saying that.
Yeah, that's okay.
It goes for all of humanity.
Oh, yeah.
I remember seeing